My name's Gavin Hayes and I'm General Secretary of Compass. I'm delighted to chair this renewal session on transforming the Labour Party. Renewal is the journal of social democracy, and they've recently relaunched their website, and it's at www.renewal.org.uk. I would urge you all to have a look. Politically, Renewal is very closely associated with Compass, and I'd urge you all to subscribe. There are subscription forms available from the Lawrence and Wishart book stand in the foyer, and you can also go and have a look at some sample copies there. Now, since 1997, Labour has lost over half its members, and given the election defeat, it's never been clearer that the party now needs to think very carefully about how it renews and transforms itself in the months ahead. And this is why at Compass we have launched a major project called Transforming Labour. And this follows on from our 2007 publication on renewing the party by John Cruddas and John Harris, Fit for Purpose. And later in the year, we will be publishing a blueprint for the party's organisational renewal. And in fact, we already ran a consultation on this to inform this work shortly before the election. And it was amazing that over 1,500 people took part in what was quite an extensive consultation on the Labour Party's organisational renewal. And we did that because, crucially, for any plan for party renewal to be successful, it must come about through a process of involving, debating and consulting with the party's activists, members and supporters. So on that basis, I really look forward to hearing all of your ideas and contributions today, which I'll also feed into the Transforming Labour project. And we also heard a lot this morning from speakers on the urgent need to renew and change the party, and on the need to make it much more inclusive and much more open. We heard about the debate around tribalism versus pluralism. And so let's continue that debate in this session. And we're very lucky to be joined by an exemplary panel of lead participants to kick off the debate. Sam Tarry, who is chair of Young Labour and led an army of volunteers and activists to successfully defeat the BNP in Barking and Dagenham as an organiser for Hope Not Hate. We've got Anne Black, who is a long-serving member of Labour's NEC and is currently its chair. We've got Douglas Alexander, who was Labour's general election coordinator. We've got Tony Robinson, who was a member of Labour's NEC, and who I'd remind him once described in 1999 Labour's apparatchiks at Millbank as dinosaurs, and who gave a brilliant contribution on Thursday night to BBC One's This Week on renewing the party. And last but not least, we're joined by the former MP, Labour MP for Bethnal Green and Bow, Una King, who's currently seeking to be Labour's candidate for Mayor of London. So without further ado, Sam, how do we fix the Labour Party?
I've got three sort of points I'm going to make. The first one obviously is going to be about Young Labour, and then I'll make two others about the party in the wider sense. In the next few days, I'm pretty sure, in fact I know, that there's going to be a campaign launched by the sort of grassroots members of Young Labour to actually call for Young Labour to be reconstituted as a socialist society. Now, for you that are not sort of familiar with the sort of vagaries of Labour Party politics, Young Labour is actually part of the Labour Party, which means it doesn't actually have its own policy-making functions, and it has a degree of autonomy, but it's not actually fully autonomous, say like the Young Fabians or even our sister movement, the Labour students are. And the reason I think that's important is because one thing that became quite obvious to me during this general election campaign is that if you give young people the free rein to organise themselves and to be innovative in the way that they campaign, they can actually be far more effective. And I think that as well as actually doing the electoral machine politics, you know, the voter ID and all of that kind of campaign stuff that wins elections, we actually need to have more emphasis on going out and campaigning as young people for other young people, not just about, you know, young people's issues, but about any issues that actually matter to those people. And I think we don't do enough of that. I think that actually having a little bit more autonomy and a little bit more independence from the party would actually be really good and healthy, actually. It would be, I think, a much better space for there to be a useful debate about the future of the party. And I think it's really important because at the end of the day, the future of the Labour Party is actually in its youth movement. You know, that is the place that the next generation of leaders are, you know, find their kind of like sparring partners, find, you know, their feet and learn the sort of trade, as it were. And I think that the more pluralistic and broad we can actually do that and make that whole organisation, it would be much, much more effective. Because I think there have been, that I've certainly found, and others within Young Labour, you know, buffeting up against certain restrictions placed on us by the party, because we don't actually have our own, you know, direct control, whether it's over finances and various other different issues, like, for example, access to data of our members, which are all the basic things, really, that you need to be an effective campaigning organisation, whether that's in the form of a campaigning NGO or a movement, or as, you know, as I said, the political sort of party machine that wins elections, because they, to me, are all different facets of actually what the youth movement of the Labour Party should be about. Just to sort of maybe reinforce that point, we've had sort of, I mean, Douglas might be able to tell me, more than 20,000 new people join the Labour Party now. Now, I've not seen the latest statistics, but I'm almost certain that a great deal of those people, maybe as many as 4,000 to 5,000, will actually be younger people, maybe below the age of 27, so being young Labour, but certainly probably below the age of 35. And I think that it's really important that we have as effective youth movement as possible to actually engage with those people. The second point, I think, in a more broader sense, is actually related again to party policy. I'd actually like to see a strengthening of the party's policy-making structures so that they actually see policies more directly and concretely actually carried through from the members and the various social societies that contribute to that process into the manifesto. Now, obviously, you know, when you're writing a manifesto, you have to respond to things that happen in those weeks and months building up, and perhaps that doesn't quite fit in with the manifesto process. But I think the key thing that I would like to see is the empowerment of members and those involved in the Labour movement as much as possible. My third point would actually be about enhancing the role of trade union members. This is key, I think, for sort of two reasons. One is that we are looking, I think, as a party at the moment, more outward, and we need to actually reach those people which, you know, really do form the backbone of actually many places campaigning, certainly financially, but also in terms of actually the sort of human resource. I mean, I certainly couldn't have got elected as local councillor where I live in Barking and Dagenham if it hadn't been for the work of my branch, my trade union. We actually, in the borough, paired a different trade union branch with each different ward, and that worked very, very effectively to actually have the members who lived and worked, and particularly the GMB activists in my branch there who actually knew those streets actually out campaigning. That, for me, was the Labour movement at its best. But it's important that we do that and we actually look concretely at our relationship with the trade unions, particularly given, I think, something that not enough people seem to be talking about at the moment, and that is that the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats are certainly no friend of the trade union movement. And one of the things that they will seek to do, I think, probably within this parliamentary term, is to, in some way, reform the party funding system. And it is a real shame that we didn't actually manage to get, you know, those heads banged together enough to actually agree the reforms that probably need to be made to party funding, because that will, if the Conservatives and Liberals have their way, in terms of actually breaking that direct link with the party, will fundamentally change the nature of the Labour Party, you know, and probably and possibly change its historic mission. It has always been grounded in the movement of organised labour, and I think that, you know, as a proud trade unionist, I'd like to see that continue, but it certainly needs reform, and we as a party need to act, and act swiftly before we have our hand forced.
Thanks very much for that, Sam. Next.